Hey everybody, this is Sheets, and I'm going to be going over the UFC card from Saudi Arabia for this weekend. First, the good news. The good news is that it is a 9 a.m. Eastern Time start, which I mean, it's good for me. I'll be able to probably watch all the fights, or most of them at least. These Saturday night cards are kind of tough on the marriage. Let's put it that way, but it's okay. We survive. But 9 a.m. start time is perfect. The bad news is that it is, at least at this point, an 11 fight card. We were hoping that they'd be adding one, but it turns out that the fight they were going to add is not going to be taking place until March or something like that. So we are dealing with an 11 fight card, which means from a DFS perspective, let's just say it's a little harder to take down a whole chunk of money. I mean, you can still win money, but 11 fight cards are not particularly suited to taking down the big cheese, which is what we like to try to do. Nonetheless, the way this card lays out, I think it is very conducive to trying to hit that 100K and playing the full 150. And we'll get into more of how we're going to actually construct that probably tomorrow night. But today we're just going to go over what we think are the best plays. Actually, I'm going to go over a little bit of strategy since we are doing this late because I'm extraordinarily clear of what I want to do. Um, First thing to note, by the way, is that Ali Askarov, I mean, this fight was postponed a while ago, but what's important is that he was 9,500. So all that remains are fighters 9,300 and below. And as you'll see when we go through these favorites, they all, you could have made a case, could have been 94, 9,500. So in a weird way, all these guys are probably mispriced. So in on an 11 fight card, it's going to be very difficult to avoid at least playing two of them, maybe even three in most lineups, just because of the upside that they provide relative to their prices. Um, the other thing that I want to let's get to this right away. This Adesanya Imavov fight. I mean, if you just want to stop here and just not watch the rest of this video, I don't think that if you're going to play the 150, I don't think you could play a single lineup with Adesanya and have it be long-term ROI. The combination of this being an 11 fight card plus the fact that he's, 8,600 and probably going to be 30% owned minimum with with a long history of not putting up ceiling performances. That's a bad combination. He's going to show up as a very strong median projection in most projection systems, and I mean for good reason. It's a 5 round fight, and he's favored to win. I can't imagine the last time a 5 round fighter that was favored to win does not get at least 30% ownership. Just on its face, because in 5 rounds, you're just gonna get points. But the thing is that you're not necessarily going to get a lot of points. And when you're playing GPPs, you need to get a lot of points. And especially when you're 30% owned, you don't have a lot of wiggle room to get there in a unique way with the types of outputs that he's just used to putting out. I mean, he's tremendous, next level striker, kind of on the downswing in his career, I guess. I mean, he's extraordinary. But from a DFS perspective, this is not a DFS fighter. I mean, he's an amazing real world fighter, but no takedowns, very little finishing upside, honestly. And he's just a guy to avoid in DFS normally. And on a DFS slate where you need to get unique, and he's the only 5 round fight, and he's going to be 30% owned, I just can't imagine a single one of my lineups to have him. I also would say that I don't think the big buy-ins, I don't think I can play him. I just don't see the path to get the combination of upside and relative to his ownership, even in the big buy-ins, that is necessary. Now, if you play cash, which I don't, you can certainly make a case to stack this main event just because it's unlikely to finish, which means you're probably going to get 5 rounds of points out of both these guys. So probably a good idea, but I don't really do that. So that's the first thing I would say. Um, so we are going to kind of hop around here, but well, let's just start with Imavov, for example. Like, well, let's not. Yeah, okay. So with Imavov, he's 7,600, and he's like plus 140, big adjusted. When he wins on a fight card with 11 fights, it's just extremely likely that he makes the optimal. Like, how do the 7,600 guys that score 90, which is what he's going to score if he wins? I mean, he's not, well, he's either knocking Israel Adesanya out, maybe. Maybe he wins a 5 round hard fought decision. That's probably his lowest scoring output. And even that gets 90. And then God forbid he wields some takedowns in there. He's upwards of 100. You know, unless this slate is riddled with all kinds of great underdogs, he's just going to be in there, So, and that's going to happen about 40% of the time. So let's just get started. I mean, he is clearly, I mean, by a ton, the best underdog. And this is a slate where you're going to need an underdog, at least at this price, maybe more, because of the upside of all these favorites, which we're going to get to. You want to just start with that? Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's start with that. Let's analyze the fight card this way for a change. So you have Gaziev, McKinney, Pavlovich, Nemov, Jasdavicius. So these are the ones I want to highlight. Okay. Of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 favorites, bigger favorites, I think 4 of them are just like on the metrics, just insane plays. I mean, let's just take a look at these. You have first Pavlovich. I mean, no particular order. Like Pavlovich is, forget that he's minus 260 to win. I mean, he's in and of himself is minus 265 inside the distance. And I'll bet you that his round 1 prop is pretty good too. I mean, he's freaking minus, is this real? Like minus 130 to win in the first round. I mean, that's, you know what I mean? That's just elite. You just can't, I mean, theoretically fade that. And then you have, let's look at the others. So Shamil Gaziev. So he's minus 300 big adjusted, I guess. He is minus 125 inside the distance. That's not as good, obviously. Let's look at his round 1 prop. Even him round 1 is plus 200. That's really strong. I mean, it's certainly not as good of a play as Pavlovich, but Gaziev looks really, really good. I mean, forgive me for not starting with Terrence McKinney, who wins every fight that he wins in the first round. I mean, every one. I mean, you look at I just want to go straight to his round 1 prop. Oh, this minus 150. I mean, when do you see that? When do you see 2 fighters on the same card favored to win in the first round? Now, if this were like a 14 fight card, I would say, well, even if he wins in the first round, is that going to be enough? On an 11 fight card, it's just going to be plenty. Okay, maybe not all the time, but enough of the time that if you told me right now that I could get Pavlovich and McKinney winning in the first round, I would play both of them in every round. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, that shouldn't be a hot take here. So McKinney, Pavlovich are just like ridiculous plays. Okay, and then I mentioned it's so funny. A Gaziev on any other card would look really, really good, right? Plus 200 round 1, minus 130 inside. But even on this card, you have Pavlovich and McKinney who are just dominant. Then you have the probably not so sneaky, but maybe sneaky. I don't know. Jasmine Jasdavicius play. So she doesn't really have the inside the distance line. Let me look at she's plus 500. But in her wins, I mean, when she gets it going, I mean, she can really get it going. I mean, well, Priscilla Cachoeira, that was ridiculous. She got 160 fantasy points in that one. The only thing I would say, I guess, is that she doesn't really go to work too much on the ground. Like this is 100, this is 90, this is 85, this is 105. So yeah, I guess I was a little more excited about the Jazz Devicius play when I thought about it. And then I'm looking at her compared to those other two. It's kind of obscene. Okay. But I do think that those that takedown upside puts her at least close to Gaziev. I mean, maybe not. 8,900, you save the 400s, definitely in play. So as opposed to, for example, let's look at Naimov for a second. Okay. So Naimov, relative to the guys that we just talked about and girls we just talked about, him inside is like plus 170. Uh, but here it says, yeah, so like plus 170. And at that price, it's just not gonna be really good. I mean, I will say that he does have some takedown upside here, but I don't know if that's where we're gonna go here. So this one, I mean, against Silva, one knockdown, one takedown, everything went just perfectly for 120. But I don't know, comparing him to those other two, that's kind of rough. However, if those two lose, like if McKinney loses or Gaziev loses, then the scores of like Naimov and Jazdavicius might just be enough. But remember, we're playing the percentages here, and Pavlovich and McKinney are both like 3-1 or higher to win. And when they win, they're just gonna. I mean, you think they're gonna score. Um, so yeah, it definitely looks like a very, very top heavy slate here. So with that said, again, if you're gonna want to play stuff like I'll show you. I mean, let's just for example put in Pavlovich and McKinney. Okay, like you could play three of these. I mean, you probably could, but what you're gonna have to do, let's say you played this one, you're gonna have to get now. You need three underdogs, right? Or at least one mid range and two underdogs. So that's why you really got to start with somebody like um with what's his name with Imavov. So you can do this, and I think a lot of people are going to do this, which is, and we'll talk about that when we talk about lineup construction and sims and stuff. But it's tough to avoid like playing something like this because remember on 11 fight card there are variations where these guys hit a big enough ceiling that even if none of the underdogs win, you might get an underdog that puts up enough in a loss to sneak him or her into the lineup. So, I mean, that's the first thing. Now, let's talk about some of these other fights and these mid-range fights because we are going to have to play somebody. So first of all, let's start with actually the opponents of these fighters between Pavlovich, McKinney, Jazdavicius, and then again we're definitely dropping to what's his name Naimov, I guess Gaziev. Well, let's talk about the opponents. So first of all, normally what I would say is that it's very important for the underdog to to have a lot of upside. All right, it's not enough to just get the win, but on this card, because I think that all these guys are going to be somewhat popular to some degree, you just get a win from the underdog if you can get it, and it's going to be good enough. Um, Now, as far as who's got upside here, I'd have to think that all of them do to some degree, like in different ways. So Rosenstreich, just because he's a heavyweight, Pavlovich does gas out. Uh, he ended up getting pieced up by what's his name by Volkov last week, but he's not careful. I mean, if he does run out of gas, Pavlovich, Rosenstreich could knock him out, so that he's got upside. Terrence McKinney, I mean, only because like he's never done anything after the first round. I mean, it's certainly possible that that he could gas and Hasdovich can take him out. Buena Silva's got has a lot of submission upside, so she could get there. She has upside. Peterson is a pure wrestler, so I think that a good amount of his wins are going to come from him getting the takedowns going. So I think all four of these underdogs look like they have upside for openers, and not only that, but again, you don't even need really to have too much upside when you are on an 11 fight card, 7,300, and the fighters you're up against are already going to be popular. So if I had to guess where my lineup construction would go, it would be probably, really avoiding like the types of builds I usually play, which are like these mid-range builds and not worry too much about these high price guys. I think you need these. Um, like normally, let's go to some of these. Normally, I would have a lot of interest in stuff like, okay, let's just start. So Hamdi Abdul Wahab against Jamal Pogues. Like this is the way I would normally kind of deal with this fight. All right, so let's look at it. So you have pick 'em fight, 8,200 8K, perfect price tag to get guys in, and maybe you will, but you look at the inside the distance line. Pogues inside the distance line is atrocious. Hamdi's atrocious. The only thing though is that the last time Hamdi fought, he did get three takedowns and a knockdown, by the way, against what's his name? Against Dontel Mays. But even so, he only got 100. It's I certainly prefer him to Pogues because of his takedown upside. I can't imagine playing Pogues like on this type of card, given everything that I've said at all. So Handy's going to just get into some of these builds where you need to save the salary. Like, I mean, let's just, for example, okay, we did something. Well, obviously we can't do this, all right. But let's say you want to play, say, three underdogs or three of these big favorites, like I said, and then you want to play like Imavov. Then this is where you could play Handy and then only have to play one cheapo. Okay, so this way you could play three big favorites, Handy, like, and then Imavov and only one cheapo. Um, Now speaking of which cheapo, I hope you figure out where I'm headed here. I do think that in lineups without these guys, Gazia, McKinney, Pavlovich, Jets, I think you're really supposed to play the other one. I think those are the best of the cheapos are Matt or Havdovich, Peterson, Rosenstruck, Buena Silva. No, I really think that. Um, let's go back. Let's go back into some of these. So, I mean, Bogdan Grad versus again Lucas Alexander. I mean, the only reason you'd want to play this fight is just to make the rest of your lineup work. I mean, because you look at this in a vacuum. I mean, the pick 'em fight's fine, but neither one of them are wrestlers. Neither of them have a great great inside the distance. I guess Grad is better with the plus 175. So I don't know. I guess again, just for lineup construction, you're going to make that work, in a similar way I described before. So again, let's do this again. We'll do McKinney, Pavlovich, Jasmine, for example. Okay. And then where do you go? Instead of Hamdi, we'll put it like Grad or something like that. Now it's hard. Now you need, again, you'll have to play one of the cheapos and probably need Imavov or something. But listen, when you play these guys, they I don't want to play too much of them. What I would probably do is if the lineup construction kind of just led you to have to play one of those, just don't take a big stand with any of them. Just shuffle in and out of Grad, Pogues, even Abel Dawab and Alexander. I mean, all these guys. just do the same thing for your lineups, and none of them are particularly great plays. Um, Likewise, let's look at very similar one. We talked about Buena Silva already. Uh, where are these other ones? Fight number. Hogue we did. Alexander we did. Buena Silva we did. Peterson we did. Gaziev we did. Where's the Mike Davis? Okay, so here's another one. So Mike Davis versus Farazia. I mean, reasonable enough, right? I mean, Mike Davis, 8,400. He did have 9 takedowns a couple of fights ago, but that was, that was actually at least did show some good fight IQ because Borshev is just the worst as far as takedowns, and he went after it. And then I guess, I guess you see a couple of fights back. I mean, this is ridiculous. Barazian, he's been fighting, he's been doing better. I mean, since he got knocked out by Terrence McKinney in 37 seconds here, I mean, he's been great. I mean, honestly, he hasn't been particularly exciting, but he's been great. And I'll tell you, his last fight against Rutin, against Frivola, I mean, that was next level. I mean, honestly, like Frivola was like the big, you know, everybody's darling in that fight, and Zion just laid it on him. I mean, he stuffed takedowns. He got 4 on his own, a reversal, a knockdown. I mean, I I think he's extremely live in here. So between Davis's, obviously has some upside, and Ziam's got, he's got some momentum, whatever. I think they're both fine and in play, but don't make any mistakes. I mean, the reason why you're playing them is just for lineup construction to get to these other guys, and you don't. I can't stress this enough. You don't want to take any big stands with any of these mid-range fighters. Okay, you just don't know which ones are going to be good, and uh, they're there for a specific purpose, is to just make these rest of these lineups flow. So I would shuffle in and out of all those. Maybe do like a maximum of some percentage of all these mid-range guys. A couple more fights, and so Said Nurmagomedov against Vinicius Oliveira. Obviously, this could go a lot of ways here, and Nurmagomedov, he really has a tremendous guillotine, extraordinary upside as far as that goes. He's not exactly the greatest fantasy guy. Like unless he gets like early guillotine or something like that, he's not the guy to keep on piling up the points. So that's why I'm not a big fan of him. And him, when we're playing him, now we're actually like playing him on purpose. You know what I mean? Like it's like we're playing these other guys we talked about, like Mike Davis down, not on purpose, but because we needed to get to these other guys. Like if you're spending 8,700 on this card, like if you just look the way this looks, now you're like playing him on purpose, and I don't think that's the idea here. If you want, I mean, I certainly think that Oliveira is relevant, because you look at him and he's very, very aggressive. I mean, like 2 fights ago, he had 2 takedowns and a knockdown. Really, really good performance against Ricky Simone as well. It just feels to me like the fight's gonna bust. I mean, I don't know. It feels like Nurmagomedov is good enough on the feet and with everything else to fend off whatever aggression Oliveira will come to him with, and he'll end up getting a decision or something. But listen, he could get a sub. I don't, and Oliveira, yeah, I mean, in 150 max, sure. I mean, we could definitely play him. As a matter of fact, I do think I guess I was about to say he's my favorite of the non like leverage plays. Um, but I think I hit the nail right on the head when I described it. I mean, it's not like Nurmagomedov's going to be so popular that you do anything by winning with Oliveira, except for the fact that you probably will need underdogs, and they're really tough to come by today. So, yeah, sure. And again, same thing. Oliveira, Zian, like pretty much everybody that I talked about, do not take a huge stand. Um, and then the last fight before we kind of recap and look at the main event again is you have Sharon Magomedov versus Venom Page, and this type of fight is one that you know we talk about all the time. This could be a big time, awesome striking battle. Both these guys have talent. Page is a little more experienced, but whatever. But when you have striker versus striker, it's just usually not a good recipe for DFS success, and you look at their inside the distance line and it bears that out. I mean, you have uh where is it? Magomedov inside plus 250, Perez, excuse me, Page inside plus 500. I mean, these are not going to be good enough. I mean, there's literally no takedown upside in this fight. So the fight in and of itself is just a fade. And if you play Magomedov again, you're playing him on purpose, because you're spending too much. You just put him in to save lineups. So I mean, who do you like more, him or Saeed? I mean, I think they're very similar, as far as like their chances of putting up ceiling. As a matter of fact, I think Saeed might be a little bit better just because of his submission upside. So I don't know. So I think overall, if I didn't hammer this home enough, where I think you should take your stands this week are in those big favorites. Okay. And so McKinney, Pavlovich, Jazz Davicius to some degree, and Gaziev to some degree. And then the next thing that I would do is prioritize the opponents, like the cheapos. That's the way kind of DFS works. Is this concept of leverage? Like these guys all have just big upside, but if they don't get it, like I don't see many variations where these fighters get there without scoring a lot. So they're either going to score a lot or they're going to lose pretty much. And if they lose, you kind of want these guys. So I prioritize all of this. Definitely play zero of Adesanya. That's would be my advice. Play a ton of Imavov for the 40% of the chance that he wins. And you could actually do that. Like you could say it that way. You could say, well, 40% of the chance time he wins, it's gonna be optimal. Let me play 40% of him. It's not exactly perfect logic, but whatever. And then just hope, and then really just of these mid-range guys, don't play too much. Okay. What's interesting is as far as like fighters that I would just play none of, this might seem kind of counterintuitive because I'm like, oh, you don't want this guy, you don't want this guy. I don't think I'm going to leave anybody out completely. I think if I had to say who I have the least amount of, I actually don't even know, because we'll see how I get. I think that Hamdi is going to be a little bit too popular. I think Pogues gets actually some weird bit of leverage against him. I think this Alexander Grad is going to be whatever. Maybe Ofley a little bit. No, I don't know. Maybe he's the one I'll fade. I really think I'm going to end up with like some of everybody, but definitely going to be super overweight these bigger favorites this week and their opponents. Okay, I think that's going to do it for now. We're going to do a maybe a betting breakdown tomorrow, but we're certainly going to do a lineup construction video. Hopefully tomorrow night because the Saturday morning start time, and hopefully that helps. Good luck, everybody.